Okay, hey everybody, it's Dr. Cadwell, and we are recording the call as always. And today I'm gonna cover just a real quick topic on this. We had something that affected a person in our organization here recently, a family member, and it's like some drug issues, pharmaceutical drug issues that have happened, and you know, with this situation that happened with Prince not too long ago, you know, it appears that his cause of death was due to prescription pain drugs as well. And you know, I've been studying this and reading it for quite a number of years. And as you all know, I mean, as you know, as chiropractors, our objective is to help people to heal naturally, is to really give them tools and strategies about how their bodies can actually begin to heal themselves. And so I just thought this was a good topic to cover because it also, you know, is in line with what many of you are learning, you know, through what we're doing on the Nutrimost program. So I'm just going to go over this sort of addiction issue that's been created and has really become an epidemic in this country, and really why I think all of us, you know, as human beings deserve to be 100% drug-free. The problem is that many people, once they get started down this path of drug utilization, in other words, the management of their symptoms or their what I call dis-ease, which, you know, frequently, you know, spirals into a true disease of some sort that ultimately becomes diagnosed by by their physician or whatever. You know, we want to help people understand that they can start to turn things around. So before I get going on this, number one is I want to see if there's any questions that I can answer initially for anybody related to their Nutrimost program. But number two, as always, this is not a recommendation for you to stop using drugs, to discontinue any of your drugs. I'm not here to tell you that drugs are right or wrong or any of that stuff. Remember, you know, my objective has always been, let's look at information and look at it objectively, and then let's start to ask some questions. And then oftentimes, based on the questions we ask ourselves, whether or not those are good questions or not so good questions, we begin to formulate maybe new ideas or new paradigms, which ultimately are beliefs about how things, you know, really work, you know. And many people experience a significant paradigm shift through the Nutrimost program. And it's talking about it this weekend on the radio show, actually. If you tune into the radio show on 7:60 a.m. from 8 to 9, I've got a great guest, Margie. Who's going to share her story. But I talk about paradigms and people whose paradigms change. And the thing, if you understand what a paradigm is really, your paradigm is really a set of beliefs and or habits that you utilize on a daily basis, and those beliefs and or habits are typically other people's beliefs or habits most of the time. You know, so ask yourself, how did you come to the conclusion of, you know, believing a specific thing or a certain thing? You know, you know, in the case of pharmaceutical drugs, and depending upon what that type of pharmaceutical drug is, many people are misled with basically information that's untrue, and oftentimes the company that's promoting it knows it's untrue, and that's the case here with opioid-type medications and this company called Purdue Pharma, which I'll share with you here in just a second. But like I said, the bigger picture here is to get you, as people who are taking aggressive actions towards, you know, not just weight loss, but restoring function and health to your body. I mean, that's really what this is all about at the end of the day, is us converting our bodies into, you know, bodies that work the way that, you know, God designed them to work, you know, and when all of a sudden that begins to happen, it's pretty incredible in terms of how you begin to feel. Now, is that always going to be an overnight, you know, sort of instantaneous change? No, it's not. I mean, you remember, you're unique, just like I'm unique, and so depending upon a person's history and what they've been through and what's gone on with them, their body may respond differently to certain things. And, you know, the beautiful thing is that's what makes the world go round. So, you know, don't ever forget that, you know. Look yourself in the mirror every day. Do your affirmations that have come up for you on your scan, and repeat those affirmations with emotion. You know, that's how you begin to rewire the emotional side of function within your body, is to begin to help yourself make this paradigm shift where you begin to realize that you are capable of doing anything, and I mean anything that you put your mind to. This body that you and I live in is incredible in terms of its ability to heal and to get well when we start to address the things that are interfering with its function and then begin to support it with the nutrients and the fuels and the things that help it along that path. So let me just kind of take a quick break here. I want to know if there's any questions that I can answer for anybody that's on right now that needs to, get on and off the call real quick today. So anybody have any questions at all? Okay. Well, I'll provide more when I'm done with this information. I'll stop again at the end of the call, and once again, please ask any questions. There's never a dumb question, and if you have it, it means somebody else probably does as well. All right. So, in terms of drugs and drugs in general, pharmaceutical drugs, over-the-counter drugs, specifically, I mean, obviously there's illegal type street drugs as well. But, most drugs are going to come, especially the ones that you're purchasing from the pharmacies. And if you read the back of over-the-counter drugs, you're going to oftentimes see a long list of potentially deleterious side effects that are going to be created by those particular drugs. Well, this painkiller epidemic that we're sort of in right now in this country is something that needs to be discussed and emphasized on a very heavy basis because these painkillers also can create a lot of problems functionally, for sure. But the bigger issue is what they're doing to people from an addiction standpoint, and ultimately overdosing and deaths. But these painkiller drugs are extremely addictive in nature, and they tend to be some of the most lethal drugs, if you will, in terms of the potential for serious injury to an individual. And when we look at the history of opioid painkiller medications in this country over the last decade, it's risen, 300%. So we've seen a 300% increase in prescription painkiller utilization, specifically opioids, in the United States. And if you look at the world consumption of opioid drugs and you compare the United States to the rest of the world, the United States actually consumes 80% of the world's opiates. And that is frightening. It's really frightening. And that always goes back to this, statement that I've always said is this, this say no to drugs mantra that was started back in the 80s with, Nancy Reagan is so hypocritical. I mean, the hypocrisy is insane. So in the United States, in the state of Alabama, the highest amount of opioids are prescribed in that state. And in there, you're seeing 143 prescriptions written for every 100 people. And obviously, the math doesn't add up. So it's not one person's getting one prescription. You have people that are getting multiple drugs prescribed to them. And so, what's happened due to this high prescription rate trend is that the overdose deaths from painkillers is now way surpassed those from, illegal street drugs, okay, which many people don't understand and don't know. And back in 2013, the statistics were that 23,000 people in the United States died from overdosing on prescription drugs. And the painkillers accounted for the majority of those at about 16,000 of those deaths. So the point of this is that there are a lot of people who are being affected in an extremely negative way from the utilization of these types of opiate painkiller medications. And, the sad thing is that when you begin to realize that our healthcare system has really become sort of a bottom line, make the stock make the stock price go up sort of thing, keep the stockholders happy. And you realize that a lot of it, honestly, unfortunately, has become about money and revenue, and not much of it is really, honestly, about your health anymore. And you begin to recognize this, and it helps you to understand. And, when you have these drug companies that have been caught, several of them have been caught, that are lying about the benefits and the risks of these drugs that they're pushing out onto the market, There's an organization called the Organic Consumers Association. And the Organic Consumer Association stated the drug industry has fostered the opioid addiction epidemic in several ways. And so here's some points that they brought up. So according to the Organic Consumers Association, introducing long-acting opioid painkillers like OxyContin, which prior to reformulation in 2010 could be snorted or shot, many addicts claimed the high from OxyContin was better than heroin. In fact, from a chemical standpoint, OxyContin is nearly identical to heroin and has been identified as a major gateway drug to heroin. This is a pharmaceutical, you guys, and this is a drug that's being written by primary care physicians still with some degree of regularity. Now, the good news is that they're starting to address these, what we call pill mills, where they're being written just, to everybody and their brother that walks through the door. So the DEA is actually getting involved in really trying to address this epidemic issue that's going on in these general practitioner facilities. So Organic say changing pain prescription guidelines to make opioids the first choice for lower back pain and other pain conditions that previously did not qualify for these types of drugs. So they changed the guidelines, guys. Now, when you understand that back pain 90+% of the time is mechanical in nature, you've got to have a mechanical solution. Giving somebody a chemical to just mask the pain doesn't address the reason why they're having the pain. And on top of that, when you start prescribing these people a drug like OxyContin, which is extremely addictive, and it becomes addictive really fast in terms of what it does to the body. So what happens is people get on these to try and deal with the pain that they have, and then they try to come off of them, and the withdrawal effects that they have are so intense that they have to stay on them because they just don't know how to come off of them. And then ultimately, you have an addict on your hands where the pain is not really the issue anymore. It's the addiction to the drug that they were given. So the Organic Consumers Association stated even the World Health Organization has had a hand in this problem, although it restricted its promotion of narcotic painkillers to cancer patients. They then stated promoting long-term use of opioids, even though there's no evidence that using these drugs long-term is safe and effective. This one, downplaying and misinforming doctors and patients about the addictive nature of opioid drugs. OxyContin, for example, became a blockbuster drug mainly through misleading claims, which Purdue Pharma knew were false from the start. Let's see here. A 2015 article in a magazine called The Week described and revealed the promotional strategies that were developed by Purdue Pharma and then ultimately backed by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which ultimately led to a lot of the issues that we're in right now in terms of OxyContin and the deaths associated with it and the addiction issues. So the article, a quote from the article is, the time-release conceit even worked on the FDA, which stated that delayed absorption as provided by OxyContin tablets is believed to reduce the abuse liability of a drug. Not true, okay? Ended up not being true. Well, the reality is that OxyContin generated literally billions of dollars from Purdue Pharma. So since it was approved, so OxyContin was approved in 1996, Purdue Pharma has made over $31 billion just from the sale of OxyContin alone. And they stated in this article that sales remained unaffected even after Purdue and 3 of its executives pleaded guilty in 2007 to criminal charges of misleading regulators, doctors, and patients about the drug's addiction and abuse risks. The company, Purdue Pharma here, ultimately paid a $600 million fine, and the 3 executives, which included Purdue's president and one of its lawyers, agreed to pay another $34.5 million in fines after pleading guilty of misbranding. Now, the sad thing is that this is ongoing, guys. This is, we've talked about research that is done, industry-specific research, where People are essentially getting in bed together to create literature and papers out there that are misleading the public in general as it relates to the utilization of drugs and surgeries and all this stuff. And I'm not here to tell you, once again, I'm going to say it again, like I said at the beginning, I'm not here to tell anybody to stop taking their drugs or that they're not right for you or any of that stuff. That's not my agenda here. My agenda is that we need to start talking about this, and we need to start getting this to people because, we have so many sick people, and we get to see a lot of them on a daily basis come to our offices that want to lose weight. And when we sit down with them and help them to realize that the weight is often a byproduct of the dysfunction that's going on internally, and that dysfunction has ultimately been perpetuated by the multitude of things that you've been inaccurately, in my opinion, told to do a lot of times over the years by oftentimes well-intentioned people, you begin to understand why you're sort of in the position that you're in. That's what the program becomes so powerful for people because it's very sustainable. You're doing things and providing the body with real food. You're not doing something that you can't do for the rest of your life. You're not learning, you're learning tools and you're learning strategies and information that you can use for the rest of your life, which is ultimately going to benefit, your health and your well-being. And, listen, getting weight off and ultimately restoring health of your body is not an event. It doesn't just stop at day 40. People gain momentum on this program, and it's really cool to see them maintain that momentum well after they're done with the weight loss portion of the program. And they're focused on how do I continue to help my body to stay in balance? How do I keep feeling the way I'm feeling? Well, that's ultimately what the Nutrimos Forever program is really all about, why we've designed it. But it's really, really neat to see people take control, and that's a pretty cool deal. Okay, so some really sort of crazy stuff on this that I'm going to read to you as well is let's see here. I want to get to. So in 2013, the FDA ordered Purdue to pull its printed advertisements for OxyContin, saying they had to grossly misrepresent the drug safety profile. And despite such obvious warning signs that opioids were being misrepresented and misbranded, little was done to rein in their use. More than 194,000 people have died from overdosing involving opioids, including OxyContin, since 1999. During this time, the death rate from overdoses among women has risen by 450%. This is a frightening thing because this is, this next statement here where they're talking about addiction for younger adults, adolescents and younger adults. So addiction among younger adults has also dramatically risen, as noted by Dr. Andrew Kolodny, founder of Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing. Many get caught in a cycle of addiction after being prescribed an opioid drug for a sports injury or a wisdom tooth extraction or something simple like that. They're being given these drugs which are intensively addictive to help with pain that can be managed in a safer and much better way, and all of a sudden they're turning this person into an addict. And these numbers are starting to grow as well. The other thing about opioids is they are known immunosuppressive. So when you see people get on these types of drugs, it's just a matter of time. The longer they're on them, the more rapidly you begin to see their overall health decline as well. So Dr. Cowan, let's see here, this Dr. I'll get you his name, Dr. Thomas Cowan. He's a family physician, and he's a founding member of the Weston and Price Foundation. Talks about the use of a specific drug, a low-dose naltrexone. And naltrexone is an opiate antagonist that was originally developed in the early 60s for the treatment of for opioid addiction, where it blocks the effects of narcotics by attaching to opioid receptors in your body. So for heroin overdoses, he would go into how this stuff worked. But what he began to realize as he studied this stuff was he referred to a famous study called the European Prostitute Study, showed that the primary risk factor for HIV and AIDS was neither sexual exposure nor IV exposure, but rather opioid exposure. So it's believed that the overstimulation of the opioid receptors in the body from opioid drugs results in severe immune impairment. So what does that mean? It means the system in your body, which is designed to to fight off foreign invaders becomes compromised, and it becomes severely compromised. So according to Cowan, Dr. Cowan, he says, you typically see that as soon as a patient starts taking opiates for chronic pain, their health rapidly declines as their immune system becomes increasingly compromised. So I wanted to bring up the immunocompromised statement here because, once again, opiates affect the immune system. But my question becomes, how do all these other drugs that people are taking, oftentimes in combination, how do they begin to affect the body's immune system? How do they begin to affect the body's function organically? Do they start to create issues in terms of natural production of specific type hormones that the body needs? Do they start to create issues with specific hormone receptors or key receptors on a cell in your body that's responsible for communication inside and outside of that cell? Those are the questions that I begin to ask as I look at this stuff, and that's the sort of stuff I want, all of the people that come through our doors that want to get healthy and want to get well begin to ask themselves as well. So if someone tells you that you need to take a drug for a particular reason, well, you better find out why exactly they're telling you to take the drug. What exactly is that drug going to do? What are the known effects of that drug, side effects of that drug? What can it potentially contribute to? Could it possibly cause a bigger problem than the one that I'm actually dealing with? And is there a better way to deal with this or a natural way to deal with this than a drug way? I don't know. Those are questions, like I said, that if we can get people to begin to think that way, I think we can start to make a major shift in terms of this unfortunate situation where the United States ranks first in overall expenditure on healthcare, but we rank, according to the World Health Organization, 37th in the world in terms of our overall health. There was another article that came out and showed that the United States was 44th out of 51 in overall healthcare efficiency. So we rank at the bottom of these lists, you guys, in terms of health. So we've got to start doing something a little bit differently. To finish up this whole deal on the Purdue Pharma thing, there was an article published in the Los Angeles Times around this whole situation where described that the company Purdue Pharma had extensive knowledge of evidence showing that the drug OxyContin was being sold through pill mills and organized drug rings, yet they didn't do anything to stop it. From this article, what they said is for more than a decade, Purdue collected extensive evidence suggesting illegal trafficking of OxyContin, and in many cases did not share it with law enforcement or cut off the flow of pills. A former Purdue executive who monitored pharmacies for criminal activity acknowledged that when the company had evidence pharmacies were colluding with drug dealers, it did not stop supplying distributors selling to those stores. Purdue knew about many suspicious doctors and pharmacies from prescribing records, pharmacy orders, field reports, and sales representatives, and in some instances, its own surveillance operations, according to court and law enforcement records. So it's interesting that this stuff comes out well after it starts to become knowledge well after the fact that a company has generated so much revenue from one drug. Remember, as of OxyContin came on the market, and I believe I said 96, and from that time to now, it's generated over $31 billion in revenue. Now, when Purdue sort of get in trouble with this, they were fined $650 million. That's like a drop in the hat. I mean, that's nothing for them. They just made literally billions of dollars, and a small percentage of that they paid a fine for because of the illegal activity that they ultimately got engaged in. So I want to read this from you. It's called. This is directly from Dr. McCall. It says, "Drug addiction, an intentionally created disease." More and more politicians are now starting to view and discuss opioid addiction as a disease, but more address the crux of the problem or the elephant in the room, which is that the disease has been created intentionally by the drug industry and the federal government. This pays because they can make even more money on the drugs issued to treat the addicts. Meanwhile, low-cost medical marijuana, and this is why I'm reading, because we live in this state where we've had this marijuana thing come up, and the thing about marijuana is that there's a lot of social stigma associated with it, and that social stigma is primarily based upon extremely inaccurate information. There are literally thousands of different cannabinoids within the hemp plant, the marijuana plant, the cannabis plant, and you and I have multiple cannabinoid receptors within our bodies. one particular cannabinoid within the marijuana plant or the cannabis plant is THC. That happens to be the one that gives people the high. But there are a multitude of other cannabinoids which have been identified and also seen to have tremendous, benefit to people health-wise. And so what he goes on to say is, meanwhile, low-cost medical marijuana is listed as a Schedule I controlled substance alongside heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. This really defies all common sense and logic, as Schedule I controlled substances have a high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use. But when it comes to marijuana, mounting evidence suggests it may in fact have many beneficial medical uses. It appears to be especially helpful for chronic pain conditions. One recent study found patients given the herb experienced 30% or greater improvement in pain compared with placebo. Other research has found marijuana therapy produced dramatic physical and mental improvements in nursing home patients while simultaneously reducing the need for other medications. So you see, this is, like I said at the beginning of the call today, this is called a paradigm shift. Are the beliefs that you have, these habits, these ideas that you operate from on a daily basis, and many times automatically, are they actually yours, or are they created by negative propaganda or information that's extremely inaccurate or misleading or misguiding? I don't know. That's a question, once again, to ask yourself. Because we're seeing a lot of benefits to people that are actually choosing to utilize medical marijuana to manage their pain as opposed to these opioid-type drugs. So I know you may be going, what the heck does this have to do with the Nutrimos program? Well, what it has to do with the Nutrimos program is that, like I've always said from the very beginning, the Nutrimos program is a health restoration program at the end of the day. It's about teaching people to begin to think, for themselves and to begin to gather, tools and strategies that they can apply for a lifetime, and to get them on the road to this lifestyle that begins to promote health and function, happiness, joy, abundance and good things in their life. When you have people that are sick and unhealthy, they're on a bunch of different drugs, they don't feel well, they're not sleeping well, they don't have any energy, they're just not, they're not genuinely happy. And that, unfortunately, is a bit of an epidemic right now. And we have many, many people who have been able to discontinue the utilization of multiple types of pharmaceutical drugs through this program, not because we tell them to stop them, but what happens is they begin to experience restoration of function of their body, and they start to feel well and get healthy again. The need for their drugs just goes away because they don't have the symptoms that the drugs were treating. So that's the really, really interesting thing that begins to happen. So my passion is, honestly, it is teaching and on some level creating awareness, is to beginning to help people to become aware. And I'm not asking anybody to believe a word I say. If I can just get you to stimulate you to think about something in a different way, ask yourself a little bit different question. Ask yourself, where did I actually get this belief? See, many of you walk through our doors thinking that, going to the gym every day and exercising and burning a bunch of calories on the treadmill or the elliptical and eating a small amount of food is the way to lose weight. And that's obviously you've found that's not true. That's not the case. So that's where a paradigm shift has happened for you. We're not asking you to go join a gym. We're not asking you to hire a trainer. As a matter of fact, we're asking you to decrease the intensity of your workout during this process because the body works so hard as it begins to rebalance itself, detoxify itself, and burn its fat. That's the really exciting stuff to watch. And then when we begin to initiate activity and exercise again in the future, the person typically is way stronger than they were before. They feel better. They've got more energy to do it. There's a complete flip that occurs. So, what comes first? Well, what comes first is actually getting the body right on the inside. And when the body gets right on the inside, then the health begins to come back. The weight starts to come off, and all sorts of really neat and exciting things happen for them, not just physically, but emotionally, socially, spiritually. All this stuff that may seem a little bit corny and a little bit weird when we talk about it, but it's true, and it's sometimes hard to describe until you actually go through it. So just keep educating yourselves, everybody. You're all, doing phenomenal, and, if you're doing this program, you're doing a lot of good for your body. That I know. I get to witness it every single day, and it's really fun to have the opportunity to see it happen for so many people. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'll take any questions. Does anybody have any questions I can answer? Anything. All right. Well, I'm going to let you all go then. So have a great rest of your week, everybody.